Really, one of the great joys of what I get to do working with students is meeting people when they're 18, 19 years old, and then 14, 15 years go by, and they end up being like close friends. And Paul Angone is one of those guys. I met Paul virtually when I arrived at Westmont. He's class of '05, and I just thought, well, Paul's a good man. I'd love to be with him. I'm always laughing when I'm with Paul. We like a lot of the same oddly funny things. But over the years, Paul has become a writer. His great ability to tell stories has just flourished. He's the creator of this wildly popular allgrownup.com, grown spelled G-R-O-A-N, a place for 20-somethings struggling with what now. Is there anyone here who's not wondering about what now, especially if you're a senior? Paul's married to Naomi, has two lovely daughters. He's just a good friend, and I'm so glad to have you here, Paul. Let's welcome him to Westmont, back to his alma mater.
Have you guys ever gone through a bad breakup? Maybe that person's in the room right now that you broke up with. Sorry, that's awkward. Don't look at that person. Don't make eye contact. That's getting off to a good start, right? I had a breakup while I was here, actually, my senior year, where I stayed with this girl, really into her. She invited me to come meet the parents, right? Big deal. I'm going to meet the mom for the first time. So I drove down to San Diego, meet the mom. It goes really well. I'm thinking, as I drive my way up, I'm thinking, oh, this is amazing. This might be the one, right? We're always asking, is this the one? I think I found the one. And I'm driving, and it's pouring rain. I mean, like a hurricane. And I'm in my '93 Honda Civic. I'm barely standing on the road, but it doesn't even matter because I think I'm in love. I think I got this. As I'm driving up the 101, there's a huge mudslide that happens, and the 101 is closed, shut down. So I'm like, what do? I got to get back into school. So long story short, I go all the way back down to San Diego. I loop all the way back up around north. I come back from like San Luis Obispo, and I'm coming south, and I'm driving down, and I see signs, highway closed. A big truck, a jackknife, closed that highway. So both sides of the highway are now closed. I get shuttled into some field. It's pouring rain. I've been driving like 15 hours at this point. I call my girlfriend to tell her what happened. She goes, Paul, we need to talk. You just know the tone, right? This is not, Paul, we need to talk about how amazing you are. She broke up with me right there. Yeah. I just wanted to get some good sympathy going for me before I jump into my talk. But right, I mean, you're devastated. I was devastated. And after a breakup, it's kind of like, what? You don't even know what to do. I mean, I didn't even know what to do. When you get up, it's like you don't get dressed. You just like start eating Oreos for no reason and watching like Gilmore Girls all of a sudden. I mean, just starting to really get into Gilmore Girls. A little bit of Dawson's Creek mixed in. Just go back to the 90s. You know what? But when I left college, and really through different transitions of my life, really that idea of breaking up is pretty similar to what it felt like when I was leaving college. It's kind of that feeling of, oh gosh, what do I do now? I thought I knew, I thought I was sure, but as I stepped into the unknowns of life thereafter, it was like, well, I don't know. All the things I was so sure about have kind of crumbled. And, it's really a time of, in a sense, breaking up with a season, with a place. At some point, you're going to break up with Westmont College. They'll still be in your life. But at some point, you're going to break up. You're going to leave. And it's also a season where you're kind of breaking up with yourself. Where you're breaking up with who you were in this time and place. You're breaking up with a version of you that you'll never be able to go back to. Sure, there's pieces of you that are going to carry forward with you, but it's a season of breaking up. And really, transitions are like that. Transitions, we say transitions so lightly, right? It's kind of like, It's like an English gentleman talking about, I'm going to go through a bit of a transition. That's a terrible English accent. I don't even think it is an English accent, but, it's so polite. We say, I'm going through a bit of a life transition. Oh, it's nothing. Do you know what our introduction to the word transition was? It was birth. And you guys might not remember your birth. I don't. But I've experienced a few births now, having 2 daughters. And let me just tell you, there's nothing dignified and refined. And it's not an English gentleman saying, I think I'm going to give birth now. Here comes the baby. My wife wasn't doing that. She was impersonating some other things, not an English gentleman, when that baby come out. Everybody's crying during birth. Everybody's screaming. I figured out for the first time in my life that you can possibly pass out, throw up, and start crying all at the same time. They actually called the last phase of birth the transitional phase. They call that intense moment, they call it the transition phase. So as I left college, this is kind of more of what I looked like. I felt like an egg that was about to crack at the slightest fall. And I kind of had that, oh no face. And don't get me wrong, I was the guy in college that was saying, here I am, Lord, send me. Here I am, Lord, I am ready to do big things. Here I am, Lord, I studied hard. I didn't get perfect grades, but I did my best. If it wasn't for professors like Greg Spencer, I could have had all A's, but I was ready. I was so ready to do big things. But once I started entering into that season, it became just this season of what am I doing? What do I do now? All those big things I was sure were going to happen, all the ideas of making a big difference, quickly jumped in the back seat and passed out, while the reality of just staying alive took over. Because there's things called rent and eating food. And for some reason, they don't allow you to just steal food. There's no longer trying to sneak into the cafeteria to get a free meal. You can't do that in real life. They put you in prison. So I was sure I was going to make a big difference, but then a few years out of college, this is what my life was like. That's me in a cubicle. I started learning, that's when I was kind of learning that the freshman 15 is nothing compared to the cubicle 50. Let's just say I was rocking out like the ice cream aisle in the cafeteria. I was still that guy that actually was eating at the cafeteria because I was working here at Westmont. I was an admission counselor traveling around recruiting students, and then I'd come back to my cubicle and be like, wow, I'm spending my life in a cubicle. Like, a cubicle is defined as a small partitioned space. That sounds like a science experiment more than like a place to live your life. So I started becoming really frustrated. I started becoming angry. I started becoming hurt. Disillusioned. I was angry at myself because I felt like, man, I don't have what it takes. Where's all those skills? Where's all those talents that I thought I was so sure of? Where am I? I'm looking for myself again. I've kind of broken up with myself. Now I'm not back in finding out who I am. But I was also frustrated with God. I was like, God, where are you? We had this deal, right? Like, I was praying, here I am, Lord, send me. We were going to do this together. You have a plan and a purpose for me. And is my plan and purpose working in a cubicle or, just feeling alone and lost? It was an intense season. And in a season I didn't really handle very well. It was rough. I don't want to sugarcoat it for you guys, I felt like this kind of fire was kind of burning within me, and not the good kind of fire that not like the Abraham Lincoln fire or like the William Wilberforce fire, that goes and does big things. It was more the fire that destroys, that kind of burns you. That's the fire I felt like was burning. And I started doing things like trying to douse it with alcohol, you know? And that's a good, I didn't do great in chemistry class, but that's not a good combo. Fire and alcohol, they don't go well together, and I learned that the hard way. But as I started opening up and talking to other people about it, talking about this journey with other people, you know, I'm in my mid-20s now, I started realizing kind of this similarity. I wasn't the only one struggling. I wasn't the only one struggling to figure it out. As I opened up and shared the truth of what was going on in my life, that I wasn't doing all the big things I thought I was going to be doing, this strange thing began to happen. People were opening up to me and actually being honest about what's going on in their life. You know, very different than what we were all posting on Facebook or Instagram or whatever it might be. You know, all these PR spins we're putting on our lives to say, look at me, look how amazing my life is, it's so awesome, look at this great job, this great house, all this stuff. And then I'd actually talk to those people and be like, oh wow, you're wondering where God is too. You're wondering where you fit. You're wondering where your purpose is. So actually at that point, I started becoming very passionate about, okay, how do I help? What is really going on? How do we transition well into adulthood? Which was kind of the idea behind all grown up, right? You're groaning, all grown up. And I started writing about it, and actually this book right here, it comes out in 6 days, is called All Grown Up, Searching for Self, Faith, and a Freaking Job. Sorry, it's in my subtitle, Ben. I had to say freaking. I don't know if that's allowed, but it's in my subtitle. It's part of my contract. I have to read it. But I started writing this. I started trying to figure out, okay, what's really going on? And so I thought, well, you know what? It's time to pursue my dreams again. I'm going to become a writer. That's what I'm going to do. No longer in the cubicle. I'm going to go write. So that's what I did. I packed up and went to LA. You know, because LA is kind of that place when you don't have a real clue what you're doing, but you got like a half-written manuscript, and you have an agent of some sort. You move to LA, because that's like 90% of LA. No idea what they're doing. They have half-completed manuscript, but they're down in LA. And then you go to Hollywood, right? And the first moment that you're in Hollywood, you realize how un-Hollywood Hollywood is. That they just turn on the lights when you have a budget of like 25 million, but if you don't have that, it's kind of a dismal, bleak place. So I started trying to pursue my dreams there of becoming a full-time writer. I started dreaming again of saying, okay, God, let's do this again. I'm ready. I'm going to step back into that. Okay, God, here I am. Use me. Send me. I'm ready to do big things. I'm going to write a book and help encourage other 20-somethings that are going through an intense process, through this intense transition process. And in that LA, I lived with some Westmont alums. I lived with some great friends, and I lived with this one guy, Micah. And this is a picture of Micah and me, and MacGyver. Has anybody watched MacGyver? Do you guys still know what MacGyver is, right? So Mike and I, let's just say, we weren't the poster children for Westmont success at this point. You know, Micah is working part-time construction and part-time substitute teaching. I am an aspiring author, which pretty much means I'm broke and unemployed. And we were in this house, and we were just trying to figure stuff out. I mean, searching for jobs on Craigslist. I mean, I interviewed for some crazy jobs. I won't even go into all those stories, but just some wild things. We were looking into a Craigslist study on depression where they give you like experimental drugs, and they pay you like $7,500 to do it, but you're like locked into a room for 2 weeks and they experiment on you, and we were this close to maybe think that's a good idea. And I remember being at this house, and this house was a funky house. It was in actually Sierra Madre, which is kind of, you know, parts of LA County. And we had this crazy neighbor that lived right next to us. Her name was Jane. And Jane was somewhere between like 45 years old and like 70 years old. You don't usually give somebody like a 25-year age ballpark, but Jane used to travel around with Fleetwood Mac. Stevie Nicks, she was their hairdresser, Stevie Nicks' hairdresser, which she would tell you about all the time. So Jane had this long, long gray hair that would come down to the end of her t-shirt, and that's all she wore pretty much every day. The long gray hair, rocking the t-shirt, like Grateful Dead or Fleetwood Mac or something. And Jane had probably dabbled a little bit in some drugs. I don't want to judge her, but she's, I think, still dabbling in some drugs, so she was a little crazy. Sometimes when we turn the dryer on at night and we'd be kind of going to bed, you'd hear like our back door being unlocked through a screen, and Jane would be coming in and turning off our dryer because it was too loud for her. So a little weird, a little freaky. She had a mannequin that sat on her front step that just stared at our house. And then she also was always trying to invite you in to see a lock of Stevie Nicks' hair that she had in a safe. And it never really felt like a good idea to enter her house to see like dead hair. It felt like this is kind of like where Misery, if you've ever seen the movie Misery, I kind of feel like that's where that's going to go. Basically, this wasn't like the sitcom, 20-something sitcom that we dreamed of. It was pretty much kind of rock bottom. And when I didn't think it could get any worse, Micah he was just trying to make any money he could. He started painting fence for Jane. Started painting her fence. And so I'd be typing on my computer, trying to write my book, and I'd look up, and I'd see Micah painting fence, and Jane in a lawn chair, like a lemonade, sitting back and just watching his every stroke, telling him what he's doing wrong, with nothing but a t-shirt on. And I was thinking to myself, man, can this get any worse? Can this get any worse for either one of us? And when I thought it couldn't get any worse, big bulldozers started showing up, and there started becoming this huge construction process right next to our house where they were clearing all these trees for this big new development. So literally, I'm trying to write, and I have like a bulldozer like 10 feet from my head, which is not the optimal place to write. And I remember thinking, my God, this is terrible. You know, in the town that we lived in, Sierra Madre, they didn't want this construction to happen. They tried to fight it. They tried to do everything they could to not let this development happen, but it happened anyway. And so they just started clearing all these beautiful trees. You know, it was one of like those like sad things where the forest right next to you is getting demolished and you're watching it happen. So I remember just thinking like, man, God, nothing is going right. Everything is getting destroyed right now. You know, I was ready to enter back into like, oh, let's do this. I want to have faith, but I was really struggling with that. You know, and that's when I started just really having to hone in on verses like this. You know, what Paul talks about, that suffering produces perseverance, perseverance character, character hope, and hope does not disappoint us. I always hated reading this verse and verses like it. You know, this whole idea that we rejoice in our sufferings. You know, and sufferings is a strong term to use what Micah and I were going through. We weren't suffering for the Lord necessarily, but it sure felt that way. It sure felt like, God, man, where are you in this? But we were slowly starting to learn this verse. We were somewhat in the middle, you know, the perseverance, character, hope. And we were kind of in the perseverance part, struggling to find hope, struggling to get there. And that's really what this verse is about, right? And I think that's what transitions are about. These periods where you have no clue what you're doing next. And these kind of transitions happen throughout our lives. It doesn't just happen once. It happens again and again and again. It's this breaking season. You're breaking up with yourself. And you can't break up with yourself without a lot of breaking in the process. And then another verse from Paul in Romans is that hope does not involve what we already have or see. For who goes around hoping for what he already has? But if we wait expectantly for things we have never seen, then we hope with true perseverance and eager anticipation. A similar thing happens when we pray. We are weak and do not know how to pray, so the Spirit steps in and articulates prayers for us with groaning too profound for words. I didn't know when I came up with all grown up that it was so biblical, but apparently it was. This groaning too profound for words, that is actually what the Spirit does for us. And really the whole point, the whole goal is to get down to hope. A hope in the truth and the love of God, beyond what we think He is doing or not doing for us at that given moment. Because there will definitely be times where you're going to feel like, God, where are you in this? Where are you, God? Show up. You know, kind of those lamentations that David would pray in the Psalms. God, where are you? Why have you forsaken me? You said I was going to be the king. You know? And then next thing, David was playing the harp for Saul, and he's trying to get, you know, he's getting spears thrown at him, and Saul's trying to stick him to the wall. Talk about a bad day at the office. I thought my cubicle was bad. My boss wasn't trying to stick me to the wall with a spear. And that's really what the fight for hope is. And it really is a fight. You have to war for hope. You really have to go to war for hope. And I had to learn how to do that the hard way. Where I would go on these hikes. I would hike above the Hollywood sign in LA because that felt like a good place to go when you have no idea what to do with your life. I would go and hike up from the Hollywood sign, and I would just pray, and I would just declare God's hope. And I would just remind myself that He was there, that His promises were true, that even if I couldn't see it in the here and now, that He was doing something amazing. And I was trying to war for that. I was trying to fight for that. And it was not easy. But there really truthfully is something of great importance that happens to us when we're stripped of everything we used to depend on. And I think we all go through different seasons of that, where everything is stripped away. And especially as you leave college, especially after you leave this amazing place. I learned the hard way how much of my identity and my faith was rooted in good grades, affirmation, community, feeling that God was doing these amazing things for me every day. That's really what my faith was rooted in. So when that wasn't happening, I became bitter. I became frustrated. Because my faith and my identity wasn't rooted on Him. It wasn't rooted in hope. It was rooted on all these trophies that I could put up. All these grand expectations of doing something big and monumental. That's what my hope was rooted in. And it wasn't substantial. So that's what it felt like still. I felt like I was going through one revolving door after another. For years, I felt like I was searching for that place to call home again. And I really think, and as I talk and as I research more about 20-somethings and emerging adulthood, as we emerge into becoming adults, I think a lot of it is this process of trying to find some place that feels like home again. And it might take a while before you feel like, man, here I feel at home. And learning how to feel at home, even when you're so far away from home, even when you're smack dab in the middle of transition, feeling at home. Because it's more important than a place. It's something more meaningful. So as I go back to that story of Micah painting Jane's fence, me writing, as we're pursuing, trying to pursue something, Micah started getting a vision for he wanted to be a lifeguard for the ocean, for the Pacific Ocean. The Pacific Ocean was trying to hire him, I guess. They had a good relationship. He knew somebody. But he's trying to become a lifeguard. So he kind of had his first vision, his plan. He was going to do this. And I started finishing my book, finally. After years of writing and re-editing my edits, I finally had a manuscript to send to my agents to send to publishers. So I felt like we were kind of getting some momentum. Things started picking up. And before my publishers would send my manuscript out, they wanted some reviewers to take a look at it, some advanced readers. And I'm like, that's cool. You can send it to some advanced readers. They can tell us everything they love, and that'll be great. No big deal. And then Micah, he finally got his chance to try out to be a lifeguard for the Pacific Ocean. And that's it's kind of an intense test if you've known anybody that's tried to do that or if you've done that yourself. It's like you have to swim in the ocean with a dead yak on your shoulders and they release sharks and you have to dodge them and stuff. I mean, it's an intense test. So as my manuscript's going out to these advanced readers, Micah's training for this intense test, and we're kind of gearing up. we're kind of ready. We're like, no more daytime TV. We're not watching MacGyver anymore. We're actually moving forward. We're doing this. Micah goes off and does his test. And while he's out, I actually get an email back from my agents from the readers. And I open it up. I'm really excited. I'm nervous. It's like, what are they going to say? Like, this has been years working on this book. Like, are they going to like it? So I read the first page, and it's all these praises. It's like, oh, this is so great. You know, they're telling me all the things they love about it. I'm like, this is amazing. Like, I'm there. Like, thank you, God. Like, okay, we're good again. Like, you've done it for me now. Like, I'm, okay, cool. I'm back. And then I go to page 2 of this document, and I notice some weird changes. One, they've started bullet pointing things. The font has dropped noticeably smaller to like a 10-point font. And it's titled Things to Work On. And it's 10 pages of bullet points of everything the readers didn't like about my book. Everything they didn't like about my voice, the story, what they didn't like about my mom, what they didn't like about what I was wearing when I wrote the book. I mean, it just felt like, just shoot me now. Just come on over. Every bullet point was like a bullet right to my heart. And then again, another season of, man, when is the tipping point finally going to happen? When is my tipping point going to happen? And then Micah comes home, and I'm excited to see him. I'm like, Micah, oh man, hopefully he passed his test. This is going to happen for him at least. He comes home right away. I know things did not go well for Micah. He starts talking, and he tells me, you know, Paul, I went the wrong way. And I'm like, you went the wrong way to get to the ocean? Like, it's just like west. You drive, you can't drive anymore, and then it's there. He's like, no, in the water. I was supposed to turn at this buoy, and I missed it, and all these teenage girls were passing me like dolphins, and I went the wrong way, and I didn't even finish. I was just so bummed. I remember being so bummed. And wouldn't you know it, that night, one of our other roommates called us up to the roof, and we look at the mountains, and we start seeing a kind of it looks like a fire up on the mountains. And I'd never been really close to a wildfire before, and that night, that was going to change. So this wildfire starts coming, and coming fast, and they start evacuating people. We had 3 other roommates in the house. They all leave, but Mike and I, we didn't leave. Because strange as it was, like this fire was like the only thing we had going for us at the moment. You know? So we're like, we're going to stay and check this out. We're going to be those crazy guys. It's like, what else do we have going for us at the moment? So we watch this fire come. We stay up all night on a hill and just watch it come towards us. If you've ever experienced that kind of power, it is crazy. I mean, listening to these 100-year-old trees just explode. It was wild seeing this fire come. And long story short, the whole town is freaked out. You know, the town of Sierra Madres, you know, they're all evacuating. All these beautiful homes, and it's like, gosh, what's going to happen? Or is everybody going to lose their home? And we stood out, and now it's like 5:30 in the morning. We haven't slept at all. The fire is coming. And there's firefighters everywhere fighting it. But do you know what saved the town of Sierra Madre from being burned? The huge expanse of cleared trees, of construction, became this amazing fire breaker that was a shield from this fire hitting the town of Sierra Madre. And I saw that, and I looked at it, and I thought, you know, there was so much failure that happened in Sierra Madre's eyes to let this construction site happen. And the construction company even went bankrupt. So that construction didn't ever take place. It was just this waste. And yet, this gigantic waste, this thing going nothing like anybody planned, ended up saving the town. And I think that's so true for us as we're going to go through transition, to remember that truth. That failure doesn't ruin your story. Failure helps you write it. Failure is a big piece of constructing the character and the perseverance and the hope that does not disappoint. Micah would later go on to be a lifeguard. They would call him back because they saw something in him. And Micah would later go on, 2 years later, and save a girl from drowning that was called one of the most dramatic rescues ever seen. It was caught on videotape. And 10 years later, after I started writing my book, 6 days from now, it releases. 10 years it took for me to see this happen. So if it takes you a while to feel like you're getting to the meat of your story, if it feels like it's more failure than triumph, be encouraged, be at peace, because God is still doing something amazing. Thank you, guys.